Hello and welcome. My name is Celeste Gardner of the Global Minded, and I'm pleased to introduce this month's Equity event, Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable with Ryan Ross, which is called The Higher Education of Tomorrow, created by our choices and actions today. If you're unfamiliar with our work, Global Minded creates a capable, diverse talent pipeline by getting more women, people of color, poverty-affected, and first-gen college students into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline by connecting them with role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. We do this through monthly equity events like today's, through our daily newsletter, which features stories of heroes who have beaten the odds, and through college programs at HBCUs, HSIs, and tribal colleges. You can find out more about us on our website, which I'll put in the chat in just a moment. I wanted to let you know as well, on November 4th, we're going to hold our first satellite event in Georgia Tech in partnership with the Georgia Tech Office of Minority Education. And I'll show you briefly here what that is. If you're in the Georgia area, we'd love to have you attend. And if not, this will be live streamed by WABE, the PBS affiliate in Atlanta. We hope that you can come or join us in the live stream. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our panel leader, Dr. Ryan Ross, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor, Student Affairs, Equity, and Inclusion for the Colorado Community College System. An educator, speaker, and actualization coach, Dr. Ross is committed to access, equity, and the development of leadership. Dr. Ross is also the CEO of Urban Leadership Foundation of Colorado and an Aspen Fellow. So welcome, Dr. Ross, and all the panelists today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go ahead and get the screen back. Yes, everyone, it is good to be with you again this month. Thank you for joining. Excited to have this month's panel. We've got some tremendous leaders from all across the country to just have a conversation that, quite frankly, will probably leave you uncomfortable when we're done, right? Because as you know, we've got an hour, so we're going to jump in, get fast and furious, but we don't have enough time to solve all the problems. But hopefully we with something to think about. And I am so sorry. There's a phone ringing in the background and I don't know where it's at. And I apologize for that. But we're going to jump right in here with introductions. And then we're going to kind of talk about where we are with higher education and where we really need to be for tomorrow. So with that being said, our first person to introduce themselves is Edgar Soto.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on. Ryan, Celeste, this is exciting. Just a little bit about myself. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, work at Pima Community College, and I was a fellow with Ryan with Aspen Fellowship. There you go.
All right. And just real quick, Edgar, what got you into higher ed and to work at community colleges in particular?
So I this is kind of maybe a little the universe guided me there, I guess I would say. I didn't go into thinking this was something I was going to do, but as I started to get more involved and I saw where kind of what my passion was, I didn't really know what it was, but I think for me, it's connecting with students and helping to get people to be at their best. So when I started to realize that I was in a place where I call it the intersection of influence, I felt like I could do more if I could be more involved and have more to do with policies, setting up systems and giving access to students who might not otherwise have access.
Thank you. Next up, we'll go with Dr. Helen Brewer.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Ryan, for this opportunity to be here this afternoon. I and also a fellow Aspenite. We really grew very closely together and support one another as professional colleagues, so I'm so happy to be here today. I am a service vice president for student services at College of the Mainland in Texas. I am originally from Maryland and grew up in Maryland for a very long time and have worked at many institutions on the East Coast. What brought me into higher education, particularly community colleges, is that I fell in love really with the mission and the opportunity that community colleges offers for so many students. I knew very early on in my academic career that that's where I wanted to be, although I didn't quite know how to name it and what it was called, especially as a first generation college student. But I know that the experience that I received and that many other students received really was life-changing for me in terms of education, in terms of starting off at the community college. I think it really provided arms that embraced me and really helped me to propel forward. And even though there are some pain points that many community college students experience, including myself, really it was the opportunity for me to be able to change my circumstances in terms of my socioeconomic background, and also that of my family. And that really resonated with me and with my cultural and ethnic background.
Thank you. Dr. Kristen Raney.
Good afternoon, everybody. And Ryan, thank you for having us all here today. It's really a joy to be with all of you. I am the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Eastern Iowa Community Colleges. I'm located in Davenport, Iowa, also known as part of the Quad Cities. I have been in higher education for about 20 years, and I've had lots of roles in both academic and student affairs. And I made my way to higher education, I think, by dumb luck, honestly, or maybe it was the universe guiding me. I took a part-time job at a local technical college at a time when I thought it would just be a great opportunity for me to work and still have a balanced life. My husband and I had 3 boys at home, and he was a high school teacher, and I thought this will work out great for our family. And I found a place that I had no idea what actually happened inside the walls of that local technical and community college. And I fell in love with everything that went on there in terms of who we serve, the second chances, the third chances, sometimes the fourth chances, you know, the students who never thought they could have an opportunity, just everything that we did. And I have been loving working in these roles that I've had over the years since then. So again, thanks for being here. And I'm also a fellow, as I think all of us on this call today.
That's what's up. Yeah, we've got the takeover happening. We're going to make education do what it's supposed to do. Last but not least, Dr. Shawnda Floyd.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's truly my pleasure to be here with my colleagues from Aspen and just spending some time with you talking about higher education. My name is Shawnda Navarro Floyd, and I'm the Provost for Dallas College. I hail from the great state of New Jersey, but I've been in Texas now for, it'll be 10 years in April. And I've held various positions, always on the academic side of the college. And I'm going to stick with the universe, right, Kristen, not just dumb luck, that led me into higher ed as a second career. I used to practice law and enjoyed always helping people, but was helping people from a different lens or perspective as a lawyer, and really found my way into higher ed by the universe, and I will say luck, and have enjoyed it ever since. Started off my career as an adjunct and worked my way up through the professoriate as an associate professor before becoming department chair, dean, et cetera, and just moving up various roles through academics. So really enjoy this work. It's meaningful because I'm able to impact both African Americans and Latinos in large populations. And I am proud Boricua, yo soy Boricua. So my father's Puerto Rican and my mother is African American. So it's really a way for me to embrace the entirety of my culture, helping the whole of my people as we make our communities better.
Right on. And thank you all so much. And, you know, we're all over the place, and we're in many different places. And even though we're virtual, I just want to take a moment to just pay homage and respect to whatever land that you're on, and pay respect to our Indigenous brothers and sisters who were the first on our land, the first to till it, grow it, respect it, and have it taken away from them. And so just a quick moment for that. And please, you know, always think about that when you're doing things, and recognize our Indigenous brothers and sisters. So like I said, we've only got, you know, about 50 minutes to really get into a conversation that I know we could all do for days. And so, and for all of the participants who are here, thank you for being here. As always, if you have a question, throw it in the Q&A. We'll try to work it into the conversation. But just remember, at the end of this conversation, you know, you shouldn't leave with the feeling of all the problems have been solved. You should leave with questions, a little frustration, a little joy, but most importantly, the desire to dig deeper and learn more about what we're doing. And so we're just gonna jump right in. And so our first question, we're talking about higher education in the academy. It's so conservative. It seems to be risk adverse, you know, unwilling to make changes. The changes that, you know, we need right now to serve students in a contemporary time. But at the same time, we're saying that higher ed is where you go for innovation, and this is where you're going to get what you need for students in a fast changing world. What are your thoughts on that? And why is it so rigid, and how can we be rigid and innovative and help students at the same time? Let's start with Dr. Floyd.
Okay, we'll just jump right into it. And, I hate to use words like rigid, but we are all sort of creatures of our foundations, and education is, hundreds of years old, if not going to thousands, if we go back to monks and the monastery and how we used to be keepers of knowledge and wisdom and actually writing information down. So I think when we're talking about the type of change that we're talking about to an institution that's been in place for that long, arguably there's a lot of trepidation, a lot of fear that's associated with that, because you're really proceeding into the face of the unknown. There are some things that, we know, like we need better systems, right? We need better technology. We have to keep up. We've been very sleepy in education when it comes to those sorts of technical structures or infrastructures and systems. But when it comes to the actual knowledge and information and what it requires to produce mature thinking adults, active citizens, there's a lot at stake there, and not only reviewing lessons that we've learned from the past, history always teaches us, but what's the best way to promulgate or implement that information into the young minds of the future? And so I think that, rigid is one word, but I would say we're proceeding with trepidation, and a lot of that comes from wanting to get it right. We all know how high the stakes are because of how behind we are, but no one wants to repeat the mistakes of the past and sort of engage in even more miseducation. So I think we get criticized a lot for the thinkers that we are, because we are being reflective about our practice and trying to determine what is the best way to go about, deporting new information, this new education, being able to tell students not only information that they need to know and be productive, but how also to sort of share that in these new spaces and environment with no rules, right? When it comes to social media and just different lenses that all of the youth are facing, there's so many paradigms that, again, I hate the word rigid, but it's like we're proceeding with caution, knowing how much is at stake. So I think there is a way to get us there, but we can't be criticized for being the thinkers that we are and putting some reflection into that and giving some great pause. Although we don't want to be paralyzed, we need to move into what our next steps look like and should be to produce the outcome that we need to produce.
Yeah, other thoughts there?
So I love the perfect word, trepidation. I just read this book, or reading a book, The Four Lenses of Innovation. And there are so many other institutions or companies, businesses out there that allow for failure or allow for innovation. I think Google gives them 20 minutes to work on some of their own. And I think the expectations for educators that we've got to get it right every time. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for taking risks and for some flexibility. So I think you hit it right on the nose, Dr. Floyd, with the trepidation. We're fearful of making mistakes, but we're encouraging our students to fail fast. Like, that's how we learn. So I think you're right on with that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the things too is I would draw a distinction between our willingness to change and our ability to make that change and to do it effectively. Because I think when I'm in a room, I'm looking at the screen here right now, and I will guarantee you, every one of you wants to make your institution, more responsive to our students and deliver on what we know education can do for students. But I think we're also working in these incredibly complex institutions where there are people at every level who are in many ways in higher ed engaged in decision making, and a lot of things are woven together and interconnected in a way. So I think the commitment to make the change is one, but then trying to figure out in these complicated organizations we work in, how do we do it in a way that actually delivers the results we seek? And I think we're pretty good at making small scale changes. We can make changes in an advising team, or we can talk to the faculty in the nursing program about making changes that's going to be in their program. But we're talking, I think the focus of what you're getting at, Ryan, is whole institutional wide significant system change and reform, where I think that's just different. And I think it's really hard, but so we feel rigid and we run into these barriers when we go to try and make change. But I think that intent is there, and the desire to make the change is there.
I mean, Kristen, you bring up a really good point in terms of the culture, right? So it's not just organizational structure, it's the culture, it's the mindset. Because, I think, Ryan, your original question was, how did we become so conservative? And Shawnda, you brought up an excellent point. It's where we are rooted. So if you think of why higher education was developed, it was for the elite, it was for men primarily, right? So if people are rooted in that foundation and that's their traditional way of thinking about things, to change the culture means to change the mindset, and that it somehow causes the trepidation, causes the fear, causes the reluctancy. And so when people are in those positions, they feel as though they have to hold on to what they know. The unknown is just so unpredictable. And so there's a reluctance then to want to move in that direction, to be, risk averse, to make sure that we get it perfectly right. And you're right, Shawnda, I mean, the reflection is critical. But then also too, sometimes I think we because people are unsure of how that culture will be, how comfortable will they be in it, that they become then more, even their heels go in even deeper into making sure that we stay the way that we are. And as we know, that won't be able to work for the future.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, some really great points, right? Like, no paralysis by analysis, looking at our colleagues and recognizing that, at least on this call and everybody that I'm connected with, I consider them superheroes, and they want to do this work and they want to show up. They want to have everybody thrive, and want to get it right. But to your point, Dr. Brewer, when we think about the origins of education and who it was created for, where it comes from, whether we want to say that is for affluent white males, or if we want to say it's for the conservative South, or if we want to say it was, geared towards folks who needed the summers to do farming, right? There's a lot of different kind of origin stories for education, and we all know that, one of the primary origins of education is rooted in oppression, and marginalization of people. And so I think that there's general agreement that most of us on this panel here, or in education in general, would say that, the educational system of yesterday isn't the one that we want for tomorrow, right? And we just talked about that. But what should the education system of tomorrow look like? What does it need to look like? If we had the magic wand, right? How would it look? How would we show up in it? And what's stopping us from really achieving that? And let's start with Dr. Raney on this one.
All right, thank you. So excellent question. And where I go to is I think about kind of the what and the how. So when the institution of the future, what do we need it to be? I think what we deliver, the teaching, the training, those educational pathways that we're offering to our students have to be relevant. They have to be aligned with the industries that we're preparing students to work in, and students have to see that they're relevant. They have to understand that this opportunity that we're offering, whatever it is going to change their life. They have to see that they can do it too. So that relevance of what we do and who we serve is so important. So I think that's one. And then the other one is, in terms of what we have to look like, is we have to be this inclusive, welcoming community of learners where we are ready to meet the needs of our students. And several of you talked about how traditional higher ed is, and it was really designed for white men. And so much of the policies, the procedures, the carryover, there's remnants of all of that in higher ed today. We have to be honest about that. And then we have to say, what do we need to do to change so that when students walk into our doors, we're ready for them. And so we've got to be in that state, not of reacting to them, but being responsive to them and being flexible enough for them. So that to me is, I think we've got to land on what does that look like for all of us.
Yeah, no, I would agree with what Kristen added to the conversation, and just also say that, higher education of tomorrow, today, whatever terminology we want to use, really needs to be reflective of the human experience. And, when she's talking about inclusion, bringing all peoples in, it's no longer just for the learned, the rich, the white man, it's for everyone who seeks it, but then being wholly inclusive of what those individuals' experiences are. And that's that human experience. So we can't sort of belittle one's experience or exonerate another's over that, because it's all the truth that we're living in. And so really being able to reflect that in a positive way, being able to communicate that as being, right? It just is, right, wrong, and different people are always going to fall on varying sides of history. But the fact that things occur daily makes them the reality. And so we have to be okay and comfortable with discussing that. So that's from like sort of that social cultural perspective. But I'll also go further and add, and this goes to some of the systems conversation and really what Kristen brought into the last question about the willingness to change versus our ability. The systems have got to be different, right? Whether it's the systems that we're using to onboard, processes like FAFSA, we get into policy discussions, government discussions. You can use aid for this, but not that. How we track and count continuing education, which is not at all, but we are only get, reimbursed for credit courses. It's all education. It's all learning. We really have to look at that as a nation, how we're enabling students to access that education plus funds to secure that same education, non-credit or credit, and then how we're tracking that into completion and job placement. So all of it's extremely important. Some of that inside our walls, a lot of it outside of our walls, but all of it's relevant to moving us forward to the space that we need to be in as modern educational institutions.
Yeah, I love that, because I always feel we have these equity gaps of certain groups. It's our systems that aren't functioning, not the group. And so you hit on a couple things that I've just, and this kind of changed my thinking for a while, but some of the workforce development CTD programs where people looking at that and saying, well, that's not college. It is. You're on a college campus. You might be in an apprentice program, but you are in a place where you're getting credit, say, for example, for prior learning assessment or so we've got to look at education differently and more along the lines, for me, competence-based education, where we're going to move and flow as that student. Some students might need a 16-week class. Some students might need an 8-week class. If you're teaching Spanish, some of us here probably could get through it in 2 weeks, where others might take 8 weeks, right? So I think looking at education differently, because in the past, when the systems were set up, it was for a group of people that, hey, they had the faculty, the teachers, the professor had all the information. Now you have Professor YouTube, Professor Google. You can find the information. The faculty member's job now is to facilitate or filter that information and help it get you in the right direction. Because the bottom line, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create good jobs for people with livable wages that are going to result in lives of meaning and purpose. And that's what we're trying to do. And how we get there and the different access points we have to get there have to be respected and funded. It can't be just, oh, only this program is going to get funded with Pell Grants, but this one won't. That doesn't make sense to me. If we're going to complete a degree or certificate, it should be funded if it's going to lead to a livable wage.
Edgar, I think part of it too is that we have to ask ourselves, why do students come to us? Why do they come to the community college? And over again, we know that students say, especially students who have been marginalized historically or first generation college students, they say they want a better life. They want a different life. And if that's transferred to a four-year institution, or if that's a short-term training program that will get them into a job where they can sustain themselves and their families, then so be it. But we often are thinking about, again, the traditional lens in terms of how do people access education. And in terms of what was said about inclusivity, I think too that we need to look at what do our students need from us to make the environment welcoming, right? So how do we make sure that their experiences are validated in the curriculum? How do we make sure that we create a safe environment as they explore the complexities of their lives, of who they are, of their identities? How do we create an environment where it's okay to have those conversations without them second guessing their value system? I often think about when, I was in higher education and people will talk about individualism, right? A lot of, well, you need to make sure that you make your mark in the world, whereas my cultural values were more about the family and how do I make sure that I support the family and commitment to that family. And so it was always the second guessing of, well, I've always been taught that, you always put your family first. Whereas when I was in an educational system that would say to me, that's wrong. You need to worry about yourself first. And so there's this constant conflict. And so how do we create these environments where we start to say, no, it's not necessarily that individualism is the standard, but maybe we need to look at the different ways that different cultures experience the world or society and how they engage. So I think the more we can create those types of environments that are safe for our students, that the conversations are even happening, the more they will feel welcome and the more that they will feel like this is where they belong. And they're not just kind of a visitor that's entering this world that's unknown to them.
Yeah, the great points, as you're talking about that, it made me think of Michelle Obama's book Becoming. And there was a part in there when she talked about being on campus where, the expectation was for her to assimilate to the college campus rather than the campus saying, hey, who are you as an individual? What do you need? And how do we accommodate your uniqueness? And so when I think about the college of tomorrow, I think about like truly what it means for everybody to thrive. And that's one of those things, like really, especially for us as open access institutions, to really, to be not only open access, but, openly committed to understanding the narrative of people, right? Like who are you? How do you show up? And how can we fit that into who you are, in addition to, making sure that you get this education that you need. And I think that's another thing, right? Like this, I just, the data comes out and I laugh when I think about people who, have weird things to say or inappropriate things to say about the trades or about career and technical education. And I'm like, yeah, you saying that, but we just got this welding student a job for $130,000 a year. And your liberal arts, whatever degree, because I don't want to pick on a degree, has you stuck, at $30,000 a year with $100,000 worth of debt, right? And so, just, thinking about how we make all those things attractive.
So Ryan, let me ask you something about that, because I'm always curious about if we have somebody who is just solely focused, say welding, right? And they're focused on welding and that's kind of all they know. How do we incorporate some type of liberal arts education where they get an understanding of the world around them? Because what we're also trying to do is we're trying to create the spaces and conditions where people from other cultures, other ethnicities can learn each other's stories, right? So how can someone that's going for that one specific certificate in a certain area, how can we also give them an opportunity to explore and be open to other ways of looking at things?
I think it's a good question. And for me, I think it's about the exposure, right? So like if I'm here to be a welder and, and I'm going to build on a hotel, well, in addition, instead of just going there and doing the work, like what's happening at the hotel? How does it happen? What are the different pieces of it? How can I be more involved in all those things, right? And I think that with everything we do, we need to show people that there's a function and a responsibility, and then there's still opportunity within that industry, right? So as a welder, you can be the crew chief, you can be the architect, you can be like all those things, right? And that helps students scale a plan. So, and so maybe that is that 22-year-old architect who's like, hey, this is great. And they're going to do that for 15, 20 years, but they recognize, hey, I'm now 50. And if their bones are anything like mine, I'm not built for manual stuff anymore, right? Like I need to use some other things, like, and so, and how do I still do welding, but from this other vantage point, right? And I think that's an opportunity that we have, right? To really explore like what it means to be educated, not necessarily what it means to learn what you need to learn to get a piece of paper, right? Like I think about Socrates, you know what I mean? Like the philosophy of it, right? Like we're missing that piece. And, I think that, it's something that we need to consider, and also consider, the person instead of just the policy processes and procedures. And I know all of us have to focus on all those things, but, real quick, I'll share, I had an opportunity. There was a student at one of our campuses in Colorado that was struggling, and athlete from a reservation, and people were worried, right? And thinking, hey, like student have all these challenges. Well, when we really got through it, I took about 3 hours just to like hang out with the student, talk to them, right? Grades were fine, or well, grades aren't fine, but the work was fine. It was all in his bag, right? But the syllabus said do the work. It didn't say turn it in. And here's somebody who for the last 2 years hasn't been, on a campus. And so they haven't really been turning in work. They've been doing it and then demonstrating it on a test. So he's like, well, here's all my work right here. Like, why didn't you turn it in? Well, they didn't say so. Okay, right? What's going on emotionally? Well, I'm from this reservation. I've got this full ride scholarship. And like every time I go to the gym to shoot a basket, I feel guilty because I left my brother behind, my cousin behind, my mother behind, right? Like I have to live with that every day. And I think, that's a part of the educational process too. And when I think about the education of tomorrow, it's like, how are we addressing and really seeing the whole student? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in, attendance and the process and that we forget the person and just that empathy and that grace that somebody needs just to say, hey, you know what, you earned this. You got this. It's okay to be here. Yes, you might feel a certain way because people aren't here, but what can you do with this for all those people, right? How can you inspire? So things like that for me. You guys are all in these kinds of roles, right? Speaking of policy and procedure and leading initiatives. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you're working on, some of the things that you're doing. What innovative or just what kinds of conversations or initiatives are you leading or are part of that's kind of helping us move this conversation forward? What kinds of things are you thinking about on your campuses? Let's start with Dr. Brewer on this one.
So we are really trying to, as a Hispanic serving institution, distinguish between what it means to enroll Latino students to have that designation and what it means to really serve and be a Hispanic serving institution. So when we have recently been awarded another Title V grant, and the initial Title V grant that we had was very focused on increasing the number of Latino students who were enrolled in STEM programs. And the second one, we took a different approach. We wanted to make sure that we created a sense of belonging for our students. So actually this grant will focus on transforming the culture of the institution to make sure that we are more inclusive of literature, of experiences in the curriculum that represent and reflect our student body. And also too, we are going to be focused on making sure that we extend our information, our resources, our services to community members as well. So we've been very heavily focused on making sure that our retention and graduation rates for Latino students increase. But we know that this is a familial experience, right? So the family has to be involved. And everyone focuses oftentimes on the parents having materials in Spanish or having information that's bilingual. But we also have to think about, again, the family and what role siblings in particular play in the educational process, older siblings and sometimes younger siblings. So with older siblings, we know that oftentimes if they have pursued higher education, they will serve as the advisor, the financial aid counselor, the support system for that student. But we always gravitate to the parents. So we have to really look at how older siblings sometimes play that role. And then we have to look also too at younger siblings, because many times whatever, and this happened to be a personal experience of mine, the trajectory for that one student that's enrolled will also impact the trajectory of the younger students and the younger siblings, and making sure that they also see themselves as higher education bound. So we're really looking at how do we tap into what the experiences of students outside not only the classroom, but outside of the college campus, and to make sure that we are leveraging some of those relationships to be able to ensure that our students are successful. So we're really excited about some of the things that we're going to be doing with this new Title V grant. The last piece that I'll add too, because I know my colleagues also want to share the wonderful work that they're doing, is that we want to make sure that we tap into giving students real life experiences. So work-related experiences, whether that's in paid internships or that's externships, but opportunities where they can take what they're learning in the classroom and have some real world experience that when they graduate or when they transfer to a four-year institution, they will have developed a lot of those skill sets that they need that come only with real world jobs and different application of the theory in the classroom. So we're really excited about some of the things that are happening here at the College of the Mainland.
Nice. We'll shift over to Edgar.
So have any of you read the book, The Other Westmore? The Other Westmore. So he's running for governor of Maryland. So one of the key things he mentioned in there of a young man who had the similar name as him, but ended up going to prison for life, I think, is Westmore had, I think, grandparents and some key mentors in his life, and that was really important. And the other Westmore that went to prison had an older brother who was living a life of crime. So one of the things that I've realized through my anecdotal experiences is that if we could find mentorship, so trying to create the conditions for mentorships throughout our campus here is important. Also, I think things such as dual enrollment, which you can get that high school and college credit at the same time, and you complete maybe a year of college. So you could say, you know what, I've got some college, I could do this. And so it gives them that confidence, and not to mention what it does for them financially, so they don't have to take out so many student loans. I mean, a lot of times students come out with huge student loan debts. The other thing that I had was dual enrollment, and I also, just, you know, for me at this campus, one of the other things I'm working at is synchronized scheduling. We have 5 campuses, and a lot of times courses get dropped here. They're not full, they don't meet their requirements. So we end up having students that have to travel from one campus to another, which I had a young lady, Sarina, who gave me her project to turn in because she said it took her an hour-and-a-half bus ride to get to the Northwest campus here in Tucson. And when she gets back to her Section 8 housing, that it's shady and that she was. So these are some of the things that our students are dealing with. So we got to make sure that we set up the conditions so they have access and a clear pathway. And so those are some of the things that are going on at my campus.
Dr. Raney?
Yeah, so I'm relatively new in my role here. I've been here just a year now. So I've been in kind of an assessment role. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is kind of gauge where we are as an organization. And then in my mind, I've put together this picture of where we ought to be 5-10 years from now. And so I'm identifying kind of the gaps of where we are and where we want to be. And if we want to be just a premier institution that we talked about earlier, that's really delivering relevant education, that's inclusive and welcoming for all the students that we serve, then we've got to start positioning ourselves for that right now. We can't wait 5 years to kind of decide how that's going to work. So a couple of things that I'm really focused on. One is I'm looking at the organizational structure. When I think about what does it take to really create pathways for students that are free from barriers, that offer inclusive classroom experiences, that really engage all students with integrated support, we need leadership over that. And so one of the things I'm looking at is doing a restructuring of our academic affairs division to make sure that we have pathway advocates, that we really give deans and other leaders the autonomy to really be looking at kind of the whole experience for students from before we recruit and admit to the time they go to work or transfer. So that's one. The other thing I'm really trying to focus in on is infuse data into our decision making. And that is really hard to do, because it's not like I can just wave this wand and say, you're going to have this report and this report. I don't have an IR department here that is really the size it needs to be. It's not equipped to really be responsive in its data. So I got to go through make the case at a cabinet level. I've got to advocate, and try and get buy-in for the need for it. But that's all part of, doing the kind of day-to-day hard work of what changes we need to make now to be where we want to be. The other thing I'll say that I'm really working on right now is our dual enrollment. Here, it's our high school students at my institution are our largest population of students. And right now, so I want to make sure that we've got a model of dual enrollment that is really aligning our work with the K-12 work, and that we're really not only just focused on access, because I think that's really where we're at right now. We have an access model. What we don't have is diversity in the students that reflects the diversity of the overall student body. I don't think we've got kind of the aligned pathways that we need to be so that students are getting not only college credit, but it's really dovetailing into a high wage, high demand job. We need to do a better job in terms of helping our students develop, math and science and reading skills while they're still in high school. I think that's the very best way we can get students ready and be college ready is to do that while they're still in the high school and they start to see the relevance of education. So those are just a few things that I'm really focused on in my day-to-day role right now.
Right on. Thank you. Dr. Floyd.
Yeah, really focusing on just really an integrated network of support for our students. So in our redesign, we are going into our third year as a newly redesigned college as one. We used to be 7 separate colleges. And we're really looking at how we're supporting our students from emergency aid to childcare to just-in-time, healthcare resources, get your car fixed, whatever it is the students really need, counseling services, both virtually and in person, looking at our learning Commons, which is a redesigned tutoring center and testing center for all of our students. So we really, in our redesign, look at both academic supports as well as just personal student success supports, really for both sides of the house. Beyond that, we took a lot of care in building non-credit to credit pathways within each one of our newly redesigned schools. So no longer is it separated out. We used to talk about going to the deep, dark dungeon if you were going to take CE. It was very elusive. Nobody really knew how you signed up for CE or what you can take. And, you had to go off the beaten path to find it. So now you can really just go to any of our schools and get signed up. And part of that was really in an attempt to be responsive to how our students are taking courses. They want to be able to come out and in as they need to in order to upskill, gain a credential, or in fact, finish their degree so that they can transfer to a 4-year. So we put a lot into the infrastructure for our credit for prior learning. We have prior learning assessments that are all brand new, like stood up in the last year, so that we can be responsive to students who have some credits, who have some real world and real life experience. How are we going to accept that, apply that, and then move them on? And this has been really helpful even in partnerships with corporations. We've been able to set up several work-learn models where students are actually coming to school but being paid while they're educated to get the education that they're getting to then go into the workforce. We have the first ever teacher apprenticeship program that's fully recognized, and it is a work-learn model where they'll be earning $30,000 to obtain their teacher's certificate while they're being educated here. And then of course, on the back end, going back into the local ISDs and teaching for them. But we're really just trying our best to be innovative, to think outside of the box, to work with corporate partners, to work with community organizations, to say, how can we be more impactful in supplying you the workforce that you need while providing our students the education that they need? In any which way we can kind of fill those gaps. We've been working through that and really initially started off through the use of a lot of HER funds when we were getting those funds, even by way of technology, just handing out laptops, hotspots, et cetera, during the pandemic. But it's really been an extended effort, really through the goodwill of our Dallas County residents and our foundation to be able to keep multiple programs going, but also expand them, again, with partners. We have multiple partners in hospitals and just other corporations that are really interested because they need a workforce and they recognize us as a driving engine or a real viable partner to get them across that finish line with the employees that they need.
Wow, that is incredible, Dr. Floyd. I tell you, everything that you're saying, I think is the ideal community college. I mean, I think community colleges are in a unique position is that we have the leverage to really eliminate barriers for our students and to create these access points because it's more accessible than most routes to getting yourself educated or getting a good job. But I just loved hearing what you had to say from the partnerships that you talked about to some of the earn while you learn. I think that is so important of actually I'm actually working on a bill right now at the state level that would allow us to do apprenticeship. So one of the anecdotal kind of examples was there was a student that was part of one of our apprenticeship programs said, I learned more 3 months doing it an apprenticeship than I did in a whole year of actually being in a classroom. So I just loved everything you had to say. And I'd love to make sure that I would love to just emulate what you guys are doing. That is outstanding.
And Edgar, I always want to say when I am talking about these things, this is the movement and the efforts that we're making, and we're seeing success. But going back to what Kristen said, I can't just lose that. It was so profound to me, not just the willingness, but our ability to do at the outset of some of these, oh, here come all the barriers. Well, we don't do that. How are you going to give a student money for that? We can't do it. And it's like, well, hold on, but what if we could? Like, and what would that look like? And so just really trying to encourage all of us on this screen as we continue in this work to continue to just push the boundaries and barriers that oftentimes are even internal, because we don't know like what we don't know or how to proceed in doing what it is we need to do. But it takes our willingness and then some persistence to kind of fight the good fight and get some results.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think just that brief exchange right there is just a perfect example of what we've got to do as educators, right? Like, we don't have to create all this stuff. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes somebody's doing something pretty slick and you just say, hey, permission to duplicate. Give me the binder. Let me copy the notes. I want to help students in that way as well. All of you guys talked about doing some really cool things, whether it's, thinking about mentorship and opportunities, being Hispanic serving versus Hispanic enrolling, right? All the programs you just talked about, the infrastructure, rebuilding things. The thing that I noticed about all those things, it doesn't just take the department that you lead, right? It takes a lot of partnership, and there's a lot of intersectionality. And so just talk a little bit about that, with that being the understanding, like, what have been the pain points? What have been the barriers that you've had to overcome to do the work? Because I know these things aren't just happening easy. At least they're not for me in Colorado. So if there's some secret sauce you got, please send it. But yeah, what kind of barriers, what kinds of things have you had to work through to move the initiatives as far as you have, or even to get them off the ground, if you will? And just anybody just jump out with this one.
Yeah, I was going to jump out. I don't know, just intentionality. I have to say that because this is something we do every day, and really bringing everyone together. Student success or student affairs, whatever you call it at your college, can meet with academics. We do. They have to all come together. It's not a point the finger at one or the other. We collectively do the work of supporting our students. One isn't more professional than the other. And I think initially it was a lot of just calling one another on some of that stuff. Well, y'all don't respect us. Our work isn't respected. We aren't looked at this way, and moving beyond all of those stereotypes of the different sides of the house to say, okay, let's forget all of that because we have this to do. And whatever is that intentional common point that you want to move forward. And then once you work through that, moving to the next one. But I think it's a lot of intentionality, and a lot of you have to own your own baggage. So where there are issues, yeah, that's true. We do have trouble getting people to answer the phone between X and Y time. Or yeah, that's true. We don't send them to the pathway advisors because we don't trust the advice or information, and working through some of those challenging realities to get to the right information in the right individual's hands to get us all speaking from the same page, I think is critical. So it's super intentional, super honest, and everybody has to meet.
Yeah, I just have to shout out to you, Dr. Floyd, because we have to be truth tellers.
Mm-hmm.
We have to call things out, and that can be so hard because, when leading change means you're going to bump up into people, and you're going to bump up into things that they own or they're comfortable with, or, saying we got to change. Somehow they're going to hear, like you're saying, I'm not doing it bad. And I'm not saying you're doing bad. I'm saying the world around us has changed. Our students' needs are different, and we need to meet those needs. So the only way we're going to do it is if we do things differently. So it is, I think I run into that a lot, of trying to get us to be really honest about what it is we're dealing with, So then we can make the very best decisions we can. So I think that's one. I would say the other thing that's really hard is, I think when we're trying to lead transformational change. I mean, we don't want just a department doing something different. We want the whole dang college and doing something together. And so that vision for that has to be so clear and so strong about what we could be, and that you're right. It's all of us together. Name a position at the college, and I can tell you exactly how that individual will impact our students, So it's not about right or wrong. It's, we all have challenges. Things make things, our work different or difficult some days. Communication is always hard, but we have to keep, I think, putting the light and the focus on what we can be. What could this look like if we live through these pain points right now? If we actually work through all of these things that feel so overwhelming, imagine what we could be doing and who we could be serving that we're not serving today. That, I think, is really just it's a pain point, but it's also like this challenge that I kind of get called to keep tackling, and I'm sure you all feel it every day too.
Dr. Raney, I think you brought up a really good point about every individual is contributing to the success or the culture change or the transformation that you want to make. And I think as leaders, it's really vital that we acknowledge the experience and the hardship that happens with some of our staff in accepting change and just engaging, because really people become threatened. If we change this process, there goes my job security, or there goes my future, my tenure at this institution. And so people hold on tight to that. But I think as leaders, we really have to acknowledge the challenges that some people go through, helping people understand what contributions they made, because sometimes people come to work, they do their job and they leave, and they're not really invested in terms of understanding how their role really does impact that transformation. But I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of our faculty and our staff and what they're going through and how to help them, how to support them as individuals, because we focus, students are our priority, and that's number one. There's no denial. But if our faculty and staff are so strained by change, and too much change, and too soon or too fast or too much of it, then they sometimes can, they're not able to serve our students in the way we really want them to, and that we know they want to too. That common thread, that common theme of everyone, I think, is very well intentioned and wants to help students and wants to serve them, but they may not understand how they can contribute to that. And so as leaders, we really have to support our staff and our faculty and be able to help them so that they can help our students.
I'm going to jump in real quick, Dr. Ross, if you don't mind. So one of the things that I guess what I would ask for your suggestions on is faculty, because like you said, they've done things a certain way and have had some success, and they're really difficult to change. The other thing I want to add to that is don't underestimate staff around you. I'm going to give you an example. The other day, I took our maintenance guys to lunch, and they had cleared out they came in on a Saturday and cleared out this area of storage so we could put other things in there so this classroom could be more accessible. And what I told them, is, I want to let you guys know how important you are, that these students are going to have a better experience because of you. You're willing to come in on a Saturday. And I said, not everything you do is seen, but it's definitely felt. And the last thing, I just want to share this because I think it's important to realize where everybody can make a difference. I have one of our maintenance guys, or grounds guys, Jesus Martinez, used to come every morning and support one of these baseball players at 6 a.m. weights. He would come say hi to him, check on him. And this player who was a DACA student graduated in 2 years. And I asked him at the end, I said, man, what got you? I know you had a lot of challenges. You're taking the bus at 4:30 in the morning. And he said, I couldn't look Jesus Martinez in the eye, who was our maintenance groundskeeper, and tell him I didn't go to class or I missed something. So he didn't want to disappoint our maintenance guy, not the baseball coach, not his teacher. He didn't want to disappoint someone who had made a vested interest in him, to making sure that he was doing okay. So don't underestimate the people around that can really make a difference also. And I let him know that also, and that I appreciated that.
That's awesome. And I think that's a great segue to my last question, right? When we think about the education of tomorrow, one of the most important things for me, at least that I think about, is the difference between change management and change leadership, right? Change management is what we do policies, procedures, change leadership is the new thought process, how we show up. But you can't do that kind of leadership if you're not okay. You can't do that kind of leadership if you're broken. You can't do that kind of leadership, if you're wounded. And so just briefly for each person, what are you doing to stay strong, to keep your cup filled in order to do this work? And if you aren't doing something, that's okay. We can take some suggestions from some folks. And for those of you who are participants, throw in the chat what you guys are doing to keep your cup filled as we hear from our panelists. And with this one, let's start with, I think we're at Edgar. Let's start with Edgar.
All right. So all of you that were at the Aspen, every morning I was up at, 5:36 exercising. That's just one of my habits that I have, that to make sure that I'm getting that time to meditate, to exercise. The other thing is that I read a lot. I do audiobooks, I read books. I'm constantly just getting information, learning. There's a book I just got done with called The End of the World is Just the Beginning. And it's just really a smart book as far as the way he kind of forecasts a lot of things that potentially could happen, and how if we set up the dominoes right, we can be in a really good position here in the United States to have a positive effect globally. So that's what I do. Thanks for that question, Ryan. Love it.
Yep. Just jump in.
I will admit openly, this has not been an area of strength for me. I think, I give really good advice to people I work with, my team, and I mean every word I say. I tell them your family, your wellness, your well-being is really important to me, and we need you whole. But I'm working on it. And I will say one of the things that I have found and finding, it's of course source of discovery for me, is I really enjoy doing something like this, where I have time to be in a space with people I respect and trust and just really enjoy being around, but to think ideas and to talk out loud about why we do what we do, and focus in on the things that get us all going, because so much of what we do is the hard part. It's the day-to-day where I can feel like I had 10 hours of meetings today and I don't know what came out of any of them, but there's those moments. So that to me refocuses me. It fills my cup. It inspires me. I'm inspired by all of you. So that's one. The other thing I'm doing more and more of is I'm doing a lot of mentoring, mostly of women, but I'm trying to bring a mentoring approach to my leadership, and it feels like teaching, and I like it. And it's a way for me to remind myself of some of the lessons I've learned over my 20 years, to share some of those lessons and hopefully make the leadership path for those that I'm working with and leading less painful at times, and really one that they're thinking about their own development. So those are ways that I think help me stay grounded in the why I do what I do, and it fills my cup. It really does.
Nice. Dr. Brewer, Dr. Floyd.
So I wish I could be more like Edgar. And I think that sometimes as a working mother, and when you have those responsibilities, you worry about your family, you worry about the students, you worry about so many different things, and being there for people that you sometimes do put yourself on the sideline. But when I notice that I'm getting to my limit, or my cup is running pretty empty, the thing that refills me time and time again is a reminder of what I do and why I do it. And that only comes from talking to students directly. The moment I hear from a student about what's going on and how they're trying to really improve their lives, or I think about the struggles that they have, it re-energizes me and tells me, okay, get back to work. Enough of, the small little tiny violin that's playing, and really start to think about the meaning behind what we do. And when I do that, I get re-energized. But I do think that we have to, as leaders, really think about health, and we really have to think about our mental health, because this is not the type of occupation that is physical as much as it is mental. And I think we talked about this many times, in that much of the work comes from the interpersonal relationships and the dynamics with staff and faculty, and that can be very draining. And so it is critical. But like I said, I aspire to be more like Dr. Floyd too. I'm sure she'll share in just a minute. But again, thank you. And these conversations are really wonderful. Dr. Ross, I cannot thank you enough for including us in this and including me personally, because it just has been so fruitful. Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah. As I'm chiming in, I love whoever just put that they volunteer to teach yoga. That's fabulous. But like Edgar, I get up and I work out, and I've kind of been recentered and refocused. And in all candor, right, Ryan and Helen know I was having a spaz out moment sort of the last time they were with me. And so recentered with exercise, but also Ryan will be glad to hear my meditation is up. So that's a good thing. And for me, it's finding quiet time, right? To just be still and to be okay with that stillness, so that you can focus in those moments and kind of just take a pause for yourself before moving on.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you guys so much for sharing your time, your talent, your intellectual treasure with us on this month's Global Minded Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable call. We really, really appreciate you. The words really can't express my appreciation. So thank you very much. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for being here. We will see you next month, same bat time, same bat channel. And don't forget to tune in on November 4th to the event at Georgia Tech. But with that being said, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you. I'm going to turn it back over to Celeste for some final words from Global Minded.
Well, thank you so much. I found it so inspirational and informative, as I'm sure everyone else did. And now you can see why Ryan calls his sessions Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. A lot of change, a lot of great ideas. We found at Global Minded that mentorship and access to role models is so helpful for students, and your ideas of apprenticeships and everything else. I really appreciate all of your time, and looking forward to everyone can see this on our YouTube channel and on our website, and we'll share this widely because it's great information. Thank you all for your passion and the work you do.
All righty. Well, with that, you guys have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next month.